Okay, Boker Tov, good morning on this very special day, which is known as Lag BaOmer. So I will explain in a moment. I know to some of you, Lag BaOmer, you know all about Lag BaOmer, and to some of you, you might have never heard of Lag BaOmer. So I will give a brief explanation, but first, let us start with the mitzvah of tzedakah to bring forth Hashem's, God's blessing into today's Torah discussion and class. And let's say a bracha and answer Amen. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niya bidvaro. So, Lag BaOmer means the 33rd day in the Omer. Some of you know that throughout the period of time between or linking Passover, one biblical holiday, and Shavuot, the next biblical holiday when we receive the Ten Commandments and the Torah, we count 49 days of the Omer. Today is the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, hence the name Lag BaOmer or Lag LaOmer. Lag, Lamed Gimel, is 33. Why has this become a great and special day? So, we have the biblical holidays, which is the 3 pilgrimage holidays, which is Passover, Sukkot, when we sit in the Sukkah, and Shavuos. We have the rabbinical holidays, which are the rabbinical holidays, is Hanukkah and Purim. Then we have holidays which have developed after that either period, which are customs. And some of these customary holidays, are celebrated in a great and special way. And one of those holidays is Lag BaOmer. Now, what does this holiday represent? And why is this connected to today's discussion? Why is that connected to today's discussion regarding why do children have so many Chassidim? So we'll talk about it. Now, what happened on Lag BaOmer, there are two historical episodes that we are told that was special, or that makes Lag BaOmer special. One is, on this day, the famous Rabbi Akiva. And there's so much we could talk about Rabbi Akiva, but the limitation of time, we want to stick to our topic. Rabbi Akiva was one of the greatest rabbis of all times. He was the rabbi of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which we'll talk about in a moment. And beautiful story and lesson about Rabbi Akiva. He had 24,000 students. Unfortunately, there was a plague and all 24,000 students died. They died in the plague, in the epidemic. And on Lag BaOmer is when they stopped dying. So that is one of the reasons of why it's become a day of celebration. And the next reason, which is even more known, is on this day, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, considered the Moses of the mystical the mystical teachings of Torah, which is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and today he's buried in Miron, where the largest Jewish gathering occurs every single year in Miron at the burial site, at the kever of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, with great festivities and bonfires and so on, occurs in Miron. This year, because of the ongoing war and battle with Hezbollah, Israeli military has closed the kever only for the locals, for a handful of those who live in the area, as preventing it from being a dangerous target for Hezbollah. So the army has closed it down. Sadly, not sadly that the army did what it did, because the army is there to protect people, but sadly that this is what needs to be done for people's protection. And I definitely do not appreciate the people that get into skirmishes or treat the Israeli police and army disrespectfully because they are in disagreement with the policies of the army, which are there to protect us. So, just as a side point, l'chaim, l'chaim, we owe our greatest debt of gratitude to those who put their life on the line to protect us. Okay, so on this day, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed away, and he instructed in the Zohar that because on this day, it was the day that he revealed the greatest secrets of the Torah. Although it's the day of his passing, he referred to it as a Hilula, a wedding day, that his soul reunites with his Creator, with God Almighty. And he said that this day should be celebrated in joy, and that has become the tradition that this is celebrated in joy. But I want to learn some lessons. Let's focus in on the first reason. The first reason we say what Rabbi Shbi, on this day, the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying. Now, that reason is questioned, that why would that be a reason to celebrate? People shouldn't be dying. The fact that they stopped dying is great, but they died. They died. So what's the celebration over here? And over here, the Chidah tells us, and there's a beautiful lesson to be learned from this. Here, the Chidah tells us that the famous Chidah, Rabbi Yosef David Azulai, who wrote many books, many holy books, and he tells us the reason why we are celebrating today is not only because of the plagues dying, since all 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died, but because of the second part of that, which is that Rabbi Akiva had 5 students that he then went ahead and he taught. After the 24,000 students that died, he taught 5 students. And the 5 students was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, was Rabbi Yossi. Let's see who else is listed over here. I think I have it over here in front of me. Is that it was Rabbi Meir, the famous Rabbi Meir, who's the author of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Loza ben Shamua. And these 5 students that he taught after the 24,000 students died are till today, they are the foundation, they are the amud, they are the pillar of the Torah, and it's passing from one generation to the next. So what we're celebrating is the continuation of the teaching of Torah and the holiness of Torah to the next generation until we have it today. They were the link. They were the link of that time. And as elaborated a little bit greater, and to appreciate this a little deeper, is from the words of Rabbi Akiva himself. Rabbi Akiva said the following. L'chaim. Rabbi Akiva, I want to read the holy words of Rabbi Akiva, taken from the Talmud, okay? Listen to me over here. My dear fellow friends. Rabbi Akiva himself, he describes the wonder of what he did. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, Hayulo talmidim biyalduto. If a person had students in his youth, in his young age, Yiyulo talmidim beziknuto, he should have students when he is older or in his elderly stage, zaken, old. Shenemar, and he quotes a verse from King Solomon. King Solomon says, Baboker zera et zarecha. In the morning you shall plant your seed. Uba'erev, in the evening, al tanach yadecha, do not, al tanach yadecha literally means don't let your hands, meaning don't stand back. Don't retire. Don't relax. Don't stop. Right? Now, I did not get a chance to look into the words of Shlomo Melech in terms of commentary. I'm assuming, and this is an assumption, and you're welcome to correct me if you're wrong, or I'll get a chance to look it up myself later. I'm assuming Shlomo Melech is talking on the simple, straightforward level is that you got to work hard. You can't just work in the morning and at night you sit around and do nothing. You got to toil. As Shlomo, a person has to toil. But Rabbi Akiva understands this verse as a person who in his youth raised and inspired and put up so many students. You can retire and say, I've done my duty. Imagine. Let's apply this to Rabbi Akiva himself. That's why when our sages told us something, they didn't just, the saying of do as I say, not as I do. They lived. They were role models of what they taught. Rabbi Akiva says the following. Rabbi Akiva, after losing 24,000 students, he had every right to say, look, I did what I had to do. I invested my heart, soul, and these were Rabbi Akiva students. They were the greatest and of righteous men. I've invested, I've done. Let the next generation let the younger rabbis spend the time in raising the next generation, the next students. Rabbi Akiva did not say that. Rabbi Akiva said, after he lost 24,000 of his dear students, and Talmidim Elo Abanim, the Talmud compares students to your kinderlach, to your own children. We could imagine the deep connection when we talk about great people. It's not just like a professor walking into college. I give a lecture for an hour and I'm gone. I have no personal relationship. There's exceptions to that. But here we're talking about Rabbi Akiva. There's exceptions. There are good, real, genuine, dedicated teachers today as well. Talking about Rabbi Akiva, his whole soul was invested in his connection to his Talmidim, in his students. After they all died, he could easily have been justified to say, I've done my part. Says Rabbi Akiva, no. Al tanach yodecha, do not sit back and retire and say, I've done my part. But no, and Rabbi Akiva himself showed the example. He then raised 5 of the greatest rabbis of the time, that they became the pillar. So Rabbi Akiva saying, Baboker in the morning, Zrazaracha, put in all your effort. Erev in the evening. Evening symbolic of a whole change in life, a whole change in one stage. I will even add that without going through the devastation Rabbi Akiva went through, is a certain element and inspiration, teaching, role model, guidance that you could give in your youth based on its perspective and your experience in life and knowledge up to that time. Ula Erev. In other words, to give you the nuance over here, it doesn't just say in the verse, never stop teaching your students. It separates it into 2 stages in one's life. Baboker, in your youth, in the morning, Ula Erev in the evening. And Baboker, Ula Erev, is here to tell us there's a stage and perspective and energy and plus of one's life in their boker, in their early stages in their life. And there's the la'erev, there's the evening. Evening can also be represented in after the challenges of life that's turned you into erev, into evening, based on the realities and difficulties and challenges of life, like Rabbi Akiva and like every single human being has the challenges of what we go through life and the experience and the growth that happens as a result of. Therefore, la'erev, when it is your evening, al tanach yodecha, don't sit back. You have to continue, not only continue, you have a new perspective, a deeper perspective, a certain appreciation of what you and only you can give to raise the next generation. And that became, it was the teachings of Rabbi Akiva's Erev. After he experienced those challenges, that is what became the pillar and the link and secured the continuity of Torah, its teachings, its values, and our people. This in itself is a beautiful lesson, but I want to also apply it to another area of life, a very important area. And this in itself deserves a long discussion, and it's an important discussion. I say this because of the following, because of two points here that sort of trigger this next discussion. One is in today's Hayom Yom. Hayom Yom means today's day. And that is a wonderful little Chassidic book that the Rebbe compiled of Chassidic sayings that he heard from his father-in-law, the previous Chabad Rebbe, and from the Rebbes before that of Chabad Rebbes. And every day there's a little Chassidic saying. Today, it talks about Lag BaOmer, and it discusses that the Mittler Rebbe was the second Chabad Rebbe. He was the son of the famous Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya. And over there it says like this, that the Mittler Rebbe on Lag BaOmer will go out to the field, and although he was not allowed to say L'chaim because of his health, he nevertheless, because of the greatness of the day, he would say L'chaim. And it was a special day for blessings and miracles, especially in the area of children. Meaning that if a couple, sadly, were not blessed with children because they physically or biologically were having difficulties having children, on this day, the Mittler Rebbe would focus on giving blessings to couples for them to have kinderlach, to have children. And there were many miracles that occurred on this day, or as a result of this day. This is the Yom Yom for today, and we saw this practice continue until the Rebbe, which I know personal stories of people who struggled for years to have children, got a blessing from the Rebbe on Lag BaOmer, and they were blessed, Baruch Hashem, with the greatest blessing that one could ask for, which is to have children. Now that's one reason where we see the connection of Lag BaOmer to children. The other reason is what we just said. We're talking about the students of Rabbi Akiva. Now, let's enter another discussion. It's an important discussion. I think it's a very important discussion. I don't know if we've discussed it in this forum in the past. There are certain areas, there are many areas, but some areas which are more important than others, where we who need is not even the right word. Who, if we live and pay attention and see the contrast between sort of cultural Western values as opposed to Torah values, the Western values as opposed to Torah values, we can see the blessings that the Torah values brings forth. And not only the blessings is not the only reason to do so, but the fulfillment of purpose. And as a result, the satisfaction in one's life versus the emptiness that one might feel is the result is incredible and important. And as Jews, it is critical that when making important decisions in life, we search out what the Torah's approach is to those decisions. That's what it means to be a Jew. That's what it means to be a human being that wants to know what God, our Creator, wants from us. What am I talking about? So let's have a discussion over here. And if you know the answer, you could answer in the comments over here. What is the first mitzvah in the Torah? What is the first mitzvah in the Torah? We asked the question, why do Chassidim have so many children? Now, not only Chassidim have many children, but that somewhat stands out. Why do Chassidim? I often get asked the question, Rabbi, how many children do you have? And when they hear how many children God has blessed us with, they're like in shock. And it's common surprise of how many children Chassidim in general have. So let's talk about that for a moment. So the first mitzvah in the Torah, there are 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. if I asked you, you were writing the Torah, what should be the first mitzvah the Torah discusses? What would be your answer? Your answer might be, you shouldn't steal. Your answer might be, love your fellow as yourself. Your answer might be, fast on Yom Kippur, don't eat pig. I don't know, a lot of the mitzvahs that have become, highly important and focused on by many. So what is the first mitzvah? As Linda gave us an answer over here, the first mitzvah in the Torah, the first mitzvah is pru urvu, be fruitful and multiply. Which we learn from this, to be fruitful and multiply is that you should have more than one child. And that's the first mitzvah when God creates Adam and Eve. He says, pru urvu. Now, every mitzvah has clear barometers or clear rules and laws as expounded upon in the Talmud. So over here, you have a mitzvah to have kindalach. Nevertheless, halacha tells us, this is a discussion of the Talmud, how many children one must have in order to fulfill the obligation to have children. There's a discussion now, different opinions in the Talmud. The conclusion, and what is brought in Maimonides and the Rambam, is in order to fulfill the basic biblical mitzvah, you have to have how many children? Let's hear, waiting for some answers in the comments from the scholars that are listening to this class. What is, of how many children do you need to have? So the answer is not a number per se. The answer is to fulfill the biblical obligation, the biblical mitzvah of having kindalach, it is to have one boy and one girl. So if you have a boy and a girl, you have fulfilled the basic biblical obligation. Now, which means like this, if you have 7 boys or you have 7 girls, you're a wonderful individual, but you have not yet fulfilled the biblical obligation. The sages learn this out, as they do, from different nuances in the Torah, and we come to this conclusion, 1 yingala and 1 delicious meidala. That's when you fulfill your obligation. Okay, fine, that's fine and dandy, right? How many of you, give us a thumbs up, have 1 boy, 1 girl? And I'm sure you love them. So where do these large families come from? 8 kindalach, 10 kindalach, 12 kindalach, 15 kindalach, where does that come from? So here the sages use the verse that we just spoke about regarding the Rabbi Akiva. Here, the Torah tells us, the Talmud tells us, and it's brought down lahalacha, it's brought down part of Jewish law. The verse we just said from Shlomo HaMelech, who says, Baboker zera zarach, in the morning you shall plant your seed, ula'erev, and in the evening, al tanach yadecha, don't let your hands go, do not relax, do not rest, don't retire, says the Talmud, and the Rambam brings this lahalacha, that the rabbis learn from this verse that although they don't consider this a full biblical obligation, that a person should continue to have children as long as they have the strength and energy and the ability to do so. Hence, from there, the mitzvah, continued mitzvah, that even after you have a boy and even after you have a girl, to continue to have children. And that's why you'll find, definitely in Chassidic families and beyond, you'll find, Baruch Hashem, large families, families that have 5 children and 8 children and 11 children, etc. Do you agree or disagree with that? So, let's talk about that for a moment. Some of the common reasons that people will give for not having too many children, whatever that number is in their head, or what we call family planning, which became something, sort of a normal approach to marriage in the 70s, I think. was having a lot of children, having many children has various downsides. It has the downside of affordability. Each child, it takes money to raise a child, and education and food and health and so on. I'm just sort of summing it up. Another reason given is parents, you need to have, we need to have sort of mental space. A child takes up a lot of energy. Number 3 is we need to have enough time for each child that is born. And if you have the children too close to each other, or you have too many children, then you cannot develop each child in the best way that they need your time as parents. So I want to discuss that. I'm going to go back to the verse, and I will say that if, as a result of today's discussion, even one additional child is born, this class has been worth it, of course, many times over. Because who knows, like Rabbi Akiva, it's not only who knows, it's a definite. The value of one child that's born is infinite. So let's take these concerns versus the benefits. I like nature. I watch nature videos. One of the things I do at night before I go schlafen, to calm down, to relax from the normal stresses of life, of running Chabad, a community, etc., which is all wonderful and beautiful things. May Hashem give me many more years of good health to do so. I watch wildlife, nature. So let's take, for example, a lioness. Yeah? For that matter, you could choose almost any animal, bird, fish. Let's take a lioness. Do you know how difficult, how stressful, how much a lioness puts on the line in order to have a litter of cubs? She has to find a safe place. She has to leave the protection of the pride. She has to open herself to danger from hyenas and other wild animals. She has to go through, the pain of the difficulty of pregnancy and birth. She has to then leave her cubs to go out and hunt by herself. Some of you might know this if you follow wildlife. And she does so all, of course, out of instinct, love for her cubs. And what happens when these cubs are raised after all the difficulties and are reintroduced to the tribe? She doesn't say, okay, I now have to dedicate myself to raising this litter, this batch of cubs. When the time comes, her body recovers. She then goes on to have another litter of cubs, and so on. So we have been given freedom of choice only so that we make good choices. We have freedom of choice, so it makes those choices valuable. The first mitzvah we have is to have kindalach. There is no greater blessing. I would say, and this might be a little harsh, I don't want to be harsh, but I want to drive through a point, and sometimes a harsh point, when its end goal is to bring about a good result, is justified. I would say much of the family planning today is not only, I'm gonna judge positively, it's not only because we're thinking of what's best for our children, it's because we have shifted to a large extent since the 60s and 70s in being a little bit too concerned with ourselves rather than what we ought to do and what's best and what's purpose and what is expected of us and what does God want from us. We have focused more and more what makes us feel good and that we could relax and we should have less burden, etc., etc. And the proof is in the pudding. The reason that we have less stress and therefore too many children will bring in strife into our marriage and so on, the result has been just the opposite. Since the onset of all this family planning and less children, it has led, unfortunately, this is not the only reason, but I wouldn't, it definitely, I believe, contributes. It's led actually to more divorce, less dedication to the family and to raising our kindalach. You arrive at middle age and you're empty because when you have, Baruch Hashem, I was a young grandfather. I was, I think, 48 years old when I had my first grandchild. Even younger than that. I was 46 years old. 40, Baruch Hashem. The blessing and, the couple of years of stress, which I had raising kindalach, and my wife, who is a tremendous blessing. She is the rock of the home. She wanted to have even more kindalach than I did, in a sense. She really did. She was amazing. So the years of extra stress and worry, the Rebbe always told us, we are worried. One of the reasons, financial. God gives blessing. With each child, God gives the package and blessing that comes with it. And somehow we manage. And homes with large families, if you are truly dedicated and you set priorities, okay, so we have a little bit of less vacation, or the vacation is not, the priority. In other words, it's all about priorities. That's what it boils down to. Priorities. Is your priorities in life so that I could have another vacation, I could have a more expensive car, I could have a nicer home, which all these expenses are on the back of other priorities. If your priorities is the first mitzvah and purpose of creation for both man and woman is to raise a family, to have kindalach, and another child is another infinite, immense blessing. And as a result, you prioritize what you spend on. There is no doubt that in the majority of cases, there are exceptions, which is why rabbis, including myself, have sometimes allowed or given a woman or a man the halachic exception of waiting before having another child. But in the majority of cases, the home with more kindalach, and if that's your priorities, I'm not saying that you only have the kindalach and then you don't invest in their time, but if your priorities and your time investment is in those kindalach, you'll have a happier home, you'll have a healthier home, you'll have a more meaningful home, and when you reach your 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, and you have, Baruch Hashem, more kindalach and more grandchildren that you could invest and you could, which, by the way, I'm interrupting myself. This was another insight that I'm learning into the verse that we spoke about. Baboker, in the morning, plant your seed, ula erev, and in the evening, al tanach yadecha, don't sit by idly and do nothing. I want to apply this verse also to your young age, which is zarazarecha, which means plant your seed. That's referring more to the biological having of children. Ula erev, I'm interpreting over here, means la erev, when you become a bubby and zaidi. Ula erev, in the golden years of your life, where at that point, you're biologically not in the position to have kindalach. Al tanach yodecha, don't rest your hands. What does that mean? Be a bubby and zaidi. Make sure that you invest time with your grandchildren. Call them up. Tell them, what did you learn in school today? Let's review the Aleph Bet. Let's review the Mishnah you learned. Let's review the math that you're studying. Invest in your kindalach and your grandchildren. There's nothing more beautiful than being a grandparent and helping them and spending time with them, quality time, meaningful time, healthy time. There is no doubt that you are never, ever going to regret in your erev part of your life, in your older years. You're going to say, I should have not had this child. I should have had one child less. It's not going to happen. I do know many people have said to me, I wish I would have had more children, more kindalach. So this is the conclusion of today's discussion. Today is Lag BaOmer. It's a day of celebration for many reasons. It's a day of celebration where Rabbi Akiva said, I am not going to despair. I'm not going to give up because of the terrible calamity that I had. I'm going to continue to invest, not only despite, but because of my experience. And we will translate this both with our own children physically, biologically. We will translate this to our grandchildren. We will translate this to our students. And every one of us is a teacher. We're a role model. I remember during COVID, when many people passed away in the early stages of COVID, there were people in Crown Heights where I grew up who were not my direct teachers, but they were role models who shaped who we were and who we are today because of the the life that the community and the role model they set and how they lived life. Every one of us is a role model. Aboker Zraz Haracha, in your youth, in your time of energy, use that blessing to plant your seed. Well, Erev Al Tanach Yadecha, in the evening, in the twilight years of your life, you have so much to give to your kinderlach, to your grandchildren, to society. This is part of what we are celebrating on Lag BaOmer, in addition to all the other beautiful things, the revelation of the mystical dimensions of Torah, which gives us a whole new appreciation of what Torah and the teachings of Torah. It is also the forerunner of the coming of Mashiach, which is promised to us by our prophets. And it's one of the 13 principles of faith, where all the deeper insights and secrets and occurrences of the world will be explained to us in a way and we will understand and appreciate. It's a time where the prophets tell us we will be able to have true ceasefire based on a true peace, based on everybody recognizing the Creator in this world, so there will be no need for war and death and sad death of life, unnecessary, so senseless. May Hashem bless us that in the spirit and celebration of Lag BaOmer, all those who need a blessing for children should be blessed with the greatest and deepest blessing that a human being can have and ask themselves. All those who have children but can still have children, and for various reasons have made a decision not to have children, hopefully this class, unless you have like real extenuating circumstances, I hope that this class and this discussion will penetrate and you'll say to yourself, perhaps it's time for another child. I know someone in the broader community that after 16 years decided to have another child. They have a beautiful baby, and they are so blessed that they actually now want to have another child. So think about it, and you're welcome to call me or send me a message if you have further discussion, questions, objections, whatever it might be. May Hashem bless you. May we speedily merit to the coming of Mashiach, when there will be a blessing in having children as well. So let's do so. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful rest of Lag BaOmer.